views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the hosts and guests, and not necessarily those of the staff or management of Worldwide Digital Broadcasting Corporation.
Hot topics, food, fun, entertainment, and serious business. Live Las Vegas with Rikki Cheese.
We're so glad you joined us here on Live Las Vegas with Rikki Cheese. This is our brand new studio on East Sahara, just past Maryland Parkway. Do not do what I did today, which was drive from Henderson, drive past the studio to our old studio out by Cimarron Memorial High School. And I'm in Valley View and I'm going in the totally wrong direction. Isn't it funny how you do things from force of habit?
Yes. That mental, that steady, you just put it on cruise control.
Exactly. So speaking of cruise control, this is not cruise control. This is some amazing stuff. This is a new book. It's called Superpowers Activated, Discovering the Magic and Inspirational Guide for Achieving Success by my guest today, Debbie Donaldson. Welcome to my show.
Thank you so much for having me, Rikki.
I am so excited. One of the things that I want to just kind of focus on right away, because I went on your Facebook page, and then of course I went on your website. On your Facebook page is one aspect of your personality. It's grateful daughter, sister, wife, mother, grandmother, aunt, friend, author, and champion for good. And I just thought dog walker was going to go in there somewhere, right? It's like, this woman does it all. But the good is in this new book. It's Superpowers 365, Discovering the Magic. You're a public speaker, an author, and of course a publisher of success strategies for better health, better wealth, and lasting relationships. What makes someone decide to write a book? This is not a little bitty book. This is some work went into this, right? So what was the inspiration?
Well, first of all, Rikki, I'd never say dog walker. I don't have a dog, but I have a bunny. I have a rabbit.
Oh,
This
so
is my pet.
Yeah, right.
and
if you hop along.
If you're ever looking for a low maintenance pet, so I should say bunny mom on there.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Although some people who were like from a different age might think bunny mom.
Oh no, wait, not that kind of bunny.
Thank you. So Superpowers, and you also have some spin-offs. I mean, we've got a lot of ground to cover today because I want to talk about this project. You've got new projects coming up, and then I want to talk about your first book signing that just happened at Grape Street, and some of the things that you've done in the past with the Las Vegas Business Press, and of course your inspirations and how you're involved in the community. So what was the impetus? What was the inspiration for Superpowers Activated?
Rikki, I was journaling every evening, and I have written for myself since I was in my 20s, different things, mostly fiction, but children's books. But this was a journal that I was keeping, and every day at the, and not every day, but most days, I would write down a word and something about that word, someone who inspired me, someone who did something that moved me or helped me refocus my direction. And as I was writing those, I wasn't thinking about a book. Right. I was just writing down my thoughts for the day, right? And a friend of mine said, "You should really write a book." I'm like, well, I've written some children's.
And when they say it, it makes it sound so simple. Just write a book.
You should write a book, yeah. Like it's nothing, And so I had written some children's books that I had submitted to publishers, and from reading my background that publishing has been my career since I was in my 20s, and so after being rejected by a number of publishers for my children's books, I knew that whatever I did next in publishing would probably be something that I would publish. Right. I wouldn't, because so many of the publishers went out of business before they even rejected me. They went out of business. And so anyway, I wasn't thinking about writing the book when I was journaling. I was just thinking about a way to connect, with just kind of be at peace with myself at the end of the day and settle down. I was having trouble sleeping. And so one day, one of the friends that I had written about in the book she had told me this story about her husband telling her every day before she goes to work, don't let him steal your joy. And, you know, you're such a joyful person. And so I had written that down. I was really inspired by that. And I told her one day something happened, and I said, well, no wonder people want to steal your joy. It's your superpower. And I kind of made a joke about it. And one evening, I decided to just read back through my notes that I had written, and that's when I had that aha moment that this is a book that I need to share with other people.
Well, how long had you been journaling before you came to that conclusion?
I would say about 5 years.
Wow.
I had, well, about 2 to 3 years I had been journaling, and then once I decided to turn it into a book, that process took a couple of years.
I like it that when I just automatically open the book for something to look at, Superpower Forgiveness. And what I love about all of your chapters is this is not something where you're going to have to, like, you know, sit down and this is the end of the day or the beginning of your day where you can just get that little spark of inspiration, because Superpower Forgiveness is amazing. I mean, that's just it's the cornerstone of so much of what we need to do to love each other.
Right. You know, it's interesting that you bring that one up, because I had decided, I was very close to finishing my book, and I decided to start a website and blog to just kind of promote the book and keep the conversation going. And I had set the date that my website I would start blogging was October 1st.
Wow.
And that was kind of an important date here.
Yeah.
And what I had originally planned was lighthearted and, you know, tapping into some of the joy and, you know, some of the other things in the and happiness, some of the other things in the book. And I thought I have to take another tack here.
Right.
And I wrote about forgiveness in that first blog that I had written on my website, because all of the superpowers are strengths within us, and it's through our actions that make them superpowers.
Right.
And forgiveness, at a moment in time where forgiveness seems like it would be impossible, is when it becomes a superpower.
Right.
And when it heals a city, when it heals a person, when it heals a nation. And so, you know, that superpower has so many ripple effects across our lives, that it became something I felt like I needed to write about that day. Yeah,
and your other one, which is really big in the book, and I saw it on a lot of your information, is being grateful, gratitude. I mean, that's just a cornerstone. In fact, I think in many ways it is connected to forgiveness.
It is, and in fact, they're all kind of interconnected and a little bit interdependent. All of the superpowers. The superpower gratitude, I was thinking before I made my first book launch and speaking debut, I looked through all the superpowers and really look for the one that was foundational. What superpower is foundational that you don't have to have any special skills to do? I didn't believe before, so I read some research. I didn't believe we were ever born with it. But, you know, babies who come out of that womb screaming I don't believe are very grateful. So it's not like
this is kind of a tough time,
right?
Yeah.
You can't blame it on your roots. That one you own, and you can activate at any moment, even if you never have before. But most of us start the training of gratitude when we're little. Our parents start that by teaching us to say please and thank you.
Exactly.
So those little things start building on that level of gratitude, that when you take it to a superpower, suddenly you have this magic wand that's attracting the things in your life that you really want.
Right. I'm going to read some of them here, because on one level they seem really basic, but what you're talking about is once you get past the actual word, if you look at the meaning underneath the word and the connections of the words, that's when they become superpowers. Not just the word. That's a couple that I just love. Compassion. Compassion is just a big thing. I think people think compassion is just, oh, I'm being really nice, but compassion, that's power, to be able to show true compassion.
Exactly. And most of the superpowers that I wrote about were truly inspiration from friends. And I have a good friend that I truly believe that's her superpower. And she is so humble about it and would never beat her breast and, like, polish her lapel, right? That compassion is her superpower, but it truly is. Wow. And the way she behaves every day.
Grace. That's one that we don't hear. I know when I was growing up, grace was what you said before you ate. Mm-hmm. I never thought about grace until I became an adult as a way of being in the world. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that one is almost, it is almost like it's hard to talk about in a tangible way.
Right.
It's very connected to spirit.
Yeah, yeah. Humor.
Yes.
On one hand, you think that's fun, but I've been complaining about this for a while, and I'm going to stop it. I promise. I love comedy, but I love humor. I love things that make me laugh because it's just a human spirit, something. I was telling Beth Toy, who's here from one of our shows, I was telling her a story about my dogs. They make me laugh. They bring a lightness to the world. And I think that sometimes humor gets confused with comedy, like right. something, So what do you think?
Well, I talk about that within the right. superpower. Within the book, I do call out the definition. I went to Webster and to dictionary.com and pulled a meaning from there that was closely related to the intention that I had for the book. And then I, on the next page, have the person think about several questions related to that word. And then on the next page, I talk about how I believe that word manifests in action.
Right.
And humor, to me, there are two sides of it. It's the joke, it's the laugh, it's the ha-ha. And sometimes humor is used in a wrong way, and it's not funny at all. It's
right.
harmful. But there's also the good humor and good nature of a person that makes you want to be with them, and it feels fun, and they can find a way to create an environment, whether it's at work, whether you're playing, that is fun,
yeah.
and creates that sense that you're gonna that this is not funny but fun.
Yeah. Tranquility. In many ways, I think, well, it's tranquil, and you've got to be at out at Lake Las Vegas or something in the water. But tranquility is also one of those, I think, a tough one to really describe in terms of being a superpower.
When I was writing Tranquility and Serenity, I really, and I had 70 superpowers right. that I had written that I intentionally honed down to 52 so that we'd have within the book, one per week. And Tranquility and superpowers kind of were in battle in my mind for a while. And I think I define them differently and see them in a different way. Tranquility is one of those that is a feeling deep within, but that feeling deep within you radiates in a way that creates a tranquility for other people around you.
Right. And then another one that I really, really love is persistence. Growing up, my mother used to always tell me, baby, there are going to be people out there who are more talented than you, who have so much more than you, but they're not going to want it as much as you do. So she was always saying, if you want something, you've got to be persistent. You can't say, oh, it didn't work out this time, I'm not going to do it again. How else do you achieve? I think, especially now as we've got all these titans of the internet, and people forget the stories of how all these guys got started.
Right.
They didn't get started with a silver spoon necessarily. Exactly. It was a lot of hard work and going through a lot of challenges.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think of the stories of as you said, that not just the internet, but even shoemakers. Some of the popular shoes that we wear today, Nike and New Balance, the way those guys got started were out out of their garages, out of their kitchens. And they had other jobs, and it was kind of we call it a side hustle now, but they truly started those businesses as side hustles and were persistent.
And I love the way you've got the book laid out, because one of the things that's always challenged me in terms of starting a journal is if I've got to look at the blank page and start from scratch every night, next thing I know, I'm waking up in the morning and there's not anything written. But the way it's the way you have it laid out, the person has a note to themselves. It's not like you've got to sit here and write, whatever. This is like not this big deal. It's just making notes of your experience of the day. Like you put superpower happiness. Well, what's happiness in action? Happiest person I know is. Their happiness has. I'm happiest when. These 3 positive observations my closest friends would make about my superpower happiness are. So you can add in as much as you want or add in as little as you like. It's just a matter of getting it all on paper.
And I supplied some blank pages at the back of the book that each week as you journal, when you go back as the reader and look at your notes, there's my story up front and what I believe about superpowers. There are the superpowers I've identified, and then there are the notes that you make in the back, so that when you go back and read it, you're actually reading your story. Yeah.
Well, I'm working with a group of women who are just very, very powerful, and I have been just kicking and screaming. I didn't want to journal. Then I looked at your book and I thought, well, if it's laid out like this, I can do this. But if I have to sit down and look at a blank page, I'm just not going to. But once I started the process, the thing that jumped out at me most was how much of the day I would forget. If I didn't write it down at the end of the day, and we're not talking about a whole lot of things, but one was what acts of kindness did I experience that day? Right. And instead of thinking of acts of kindness like, I broke down on the side of the road and 15 tow trucks came to help me, the act of kindness was this little kid holding the door at 7-Eleven for me. Aww, and it was like little things like that. And I was walking by a car and this lady's dog reached out and just licked me. I thought, ooh. Your book does this, and so many journals do this, refocusing, helping us not refocus, but helping us focus on these little pieces of being a human being that we don't really look at, because by the time you've been working all day and you slip the kids to soccer and you get home and you barely cook, and then the TV's on and everything, and it's time to get a bath and time to go to bed. When do you have a moment to yourself?
Right.
Yeah.
And then what happens is, as we replay the day, we naturally tend to replay the things that didn't go so well, the things that were a challenge, the people that were challenging. And what this does is help us refocus in just a different frame, so that we can refocus on what did go well, what did happen right, what do I want to happen right tomorrow that was better than today. And so just kind of reframing it without being this Pollyanna, just stick your head in the sand and think positive thoughts. Right.
The concept of having a journal too is very different from having a diary. I think I'm of that generation where I thought if I had a diary, and then of course if you've ever been violated and someone read your diary, it's sort of like, I'm not putting my personal thoughts down here and somebody finds it. But the way you have this written out as superpowers, this is not terrible things happen and this is, let's focus on the positive things that happen. I mean, yes, as you said, there are challenges, but if you put it down on paper, you at the end of the day, you go, wow, some really cool things happened today.
Right.
Yeah.
And as I was writing the book, I didn't originally have those questions in there. Right. The way the inspiration for the questions happened is, as I was thinking I was pretty close to being done with the book, I had 70 superpowers and decided to hone it down to 52. And I was sharing the book with a close friend, and she said, "Well, what's your superpower?" And I went,
had you given it any thought?
No. And I'm at lunch with her, and I was at a loss for words. And I thought I was uncomfortable. I was really uncomfortable with that question. And I said, happiness. That was kind of an easy one for me. It seems like no matter, when I think about my whole life, no matter what has happened, I've found a way to be happy. And and of course, through the rest of the process, I discovered more. But I thought there are going to be more people like me. Mm-hmm. There are going to be more people who are focused on somebody else's strengths, because that was the motivation for the journaling. That was the looking at somebody else's strength and figuring out if I could employ some of that in my own life. Right. And I thought I need to ask some questions. And so, as
the author of the book.
As I went through each superpower, I thought about the questions to ask myself, and so I shared those.
Oh, that's amazing stuff. So we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to talk about how you got started, because again, just like your friends say, oh, you should write a book. Like everybody, if everybody could do it, they would all be doing it. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more of Debbie Donaldson, the owner and CEO and founder of Superpowers Activated, and some other things that are spin-offs from the book. And we're going to talk about her book signing, which was also coinciding with another friend of ours who is starting a new business venture. So just a really exciting time here in Las Vegas. So stick around. We'll be right back.
Crazy Terry here with your car care tip of the day. So it's not a bad idea every now and then to check your battery. If you don't know how to do it, have somebody check it for you. Just a visual inspection can tell you a lot about your battery. So as we can see here, this battery's got a hold down. It's nice and tight. The cables are on. They don't look bad. We've got a cover. We don't see any corrosion. Everything's kind of tight, looking good. A little bit of dirt, that's normal, but nothing's leaking. No real cause for alarm here. So that's a good sign. Doesn't mean it's good, but at least visually we know that it's intact. Okay, so we're looking at a battery here that shows signs of corrosion. We want to test that battery to make sure it's good. Usually when they're getting like this, there's going to be a problem, leaking some acid at the top. We ran the test and we find out it has 396 cold cranking amps, but the battery requires 650. So it's just not enough. The battery is going to go soon. Better to know now than later. Okay, so the benefits of checking the cable is because this cable's rotted out. What we'll find is this is the problem, not the battery. So it'll save you from buying a battery, still having the no start, only to find out that it's a cable. This type of corrosion is common in diesels. Okay, so we're getting ready to jump the car, but we have to have some battery cables. And we have to check those too before we hook them up to the battery. So here we have our standard set of battery cables. We just look them over, see if the ends are frayed, if everything's connected all right. Everything looks good here. Wouldn't hurt to check the rest of the cable just to make sure the dog didn't get it and chew it up. We have red and black. Red's positive, black's negative. You always want to hook the positive up first and then the negative. And I'll show you how that's done right now. Keep these off to the side so they're not touching each other. Hook up your positive. You can find that right here by the plus sign, the negative sign. Plus is positive, red. Make sure that's securely hooked up. Keeping these away from each other. Hook up your negative cable. Just got to fight it on there. Figure out a way to get it. Wiggle it a little bit so it ensures a good connection. Now you're transferring voltage. If I hit these two together, we're going to spark. Kind of want to avoid that. Won't kill you. Kind of fun. A lot of people think if they can turn the headlights on, the battery's fine. That's not always the case. It takes very little amperage to turn a light on, but it takes a lot of amperage to start the starter. I recommend checking the charging system every oil change. At Sun Valley Automotive, there's never a charge for that. This is Crazy Terry with your car care tip of the day.
All right. So we promised we're going to tell you because, as she says, Debbie says, people always say, why shouldn't, and I've heard that too from my friends too, why don't you write a book? Because I come from a line of storytellers. Don't ask a cheese to tell you a story. What we try to do is say, have you heard this story before? Because there's a good chance that you may have, and we don't want to repeat ourselves. But there's a difference between telling a story and putting a story on paper. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to say probably the most challenging part of the book was telling my own story. I had never intended to put my story in the book. I had thought I wanted a timeless book that wasn't tied to anything in this moment in time. I wanted it to be relevant in 10 years, in 100 years.
Right.
I wanted it to be relevant. And I guess, I got convinced by friends that my story was relevant, but I still put it in the back of the book. And I had several readers of the book before it went to publish. And every single one of my readers text me or emailed me or phoned me when they were about the same point in the book. They were only, a few chapters in, and they said, "How did you come up with this? This is so good, but how did you come up with it?"
Right.
And I said, "Well, that's in the story in the back of the book." And they said, "Oh no, that has to be in the front."
Well, now that you bring it up, how did you come up with this? I mean, why superpowers? I mean, I'm a Marvel Comics girl, so when you grow up with super this one,
Right.
super that's one thing. But so, what was your inspiration? Why superpowers activated?
It's really funny. I think there was some superpower movie coming out about the time that I had landed on this, but I will tell you that the icon here, and I'll hold it up, the little
Yes.
icon in my logo, I actually drew that a few years before I wrote the book.
Wow.
And I drew that because I thought there's something about this position that says, and there's been research on this that says, I've got this, I'm powerful, and whether you do it physically or whether you just do it mentally, it
lifts everything up.
It lifts everything up, bolsters your confidence, and it actually, there's some research that's been done by a Harvard professor that they actually measured some things in your brain and stuff after doing the superpower pose. Yeah. And so I went to a jeweler thinking this would be a cool piece of jewelry, and maybe I'll write a little superpower saying to go with the jewelry. And I still haven't had the jewelry produced, but he goes, "Well, why are you just doing a little card with the jewelry? Why don't you write a book?" And I'm thinking, what is this? This is like the third person who said write a book.
Right.
And I still hadn't decided to go back to my journal and figure that out. It wasn't until months later that I did that. But the idea for superpowers activated, and I did. Some of my friends who I asked their opinion about the title weren't a fan of the title.
Really? Why not?
Yeah, one was afraid it would seem like a children's book.
Okay.
And the like Ninja Turtles or that girl power. There's a
Yeah.
And another one thought activated seems past tense as opposed to doing it now.
Moving it forward too.
And so I just, kind of molded over for better than a year and still stayed with it. But I added the subtitles, Discovering the Magic and an Inspirational Guide for Achieving Success. The Discovering the Magic, it's really about discovering your strengths and learning how to make them superpowers. Right. Learning what actions to take to make them superpowers.
Right. How to maximize the energy you have. That was the other thing I got from the book is I've noticed just over my whole life, I can walk into a room and I can feel the energy. And there were some people, one of my jobs that I worked at, there were like 5 guys who all worked in the same department. And when I saw them, and I don't smoke, but when they were going for a smoking break, I was like the little sister who would go out there and stand next to them because their energy was so amazing. Yeah. So I would take like an energy break every day and just stand there and watch them smoke and then go back in, to my job. But that's when I really became, as an adult, aware of energy and how important that is, and to ask myself, why do I feel comfortable with this person? Why do I want to be around this person? And I get that from the superpowers is, not necessarily is it something that you or I don't have, but the activation of being in the presence of that vibration is what kind of helps bring it to the forefront.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is really an interesting way to describe it.
Vibration is everything. So now you have offshoots from this. Before we get to the offshoots, though, she just had her first book signing. It was at the Grape Street Cafe with one of the good friends of us, all of us here at WWDB-TV, Mona Van Joseph, Mystic Mona. She's got a brand new business venture called Vegas Does Business. And so we'll be talking with her. In fact, she was supposed to be on the show with you, but she had to take a trip. So, of course, we'll have her on the show as well. Mona's got tremendous energy, just as you do. For women, have things changed in any way in the last couple of years, like in the time that you first sat down and started putting this book together? You said some of the publishers who rejected you, they were out of business by the time you already went to press.
Well, the publishers that rejected me had rejected me for some of the children's books that I had written, and that had been a few years prior to writing Superpowers Activated. So when I was in the process of writing, I began investigating publishers for my book and talking to people who had published books either through a publisher or through a self-publishing house, and just really got to know their experiences. And I happen to be a control freak, Rikki.
Speaking to a colleague here,
freak.
Right? And
the thing that I kept hearing from people who had their book published by a publisher like Bantam, they were disappointed because they didn't feel like they had enough control. And so
and when you say control, do you mean them coming in and editing the book and making
changes, cover designs, the marketing of the book? There's just everything they take over and do for you, and they pay you a royalty. And there are people who, that's what they want.
That's fine
they
for them,
only
sure.
want to write. And so my background is in publishing and marketing and speaking, and so I really started doing that research and decided to self-publish, but I kept still investigating. I thought I would just self-publish on Amazon, and I pulled down their contract and read it, and they really only had the paperback versions and of course audio and Kindle, but not the hardcover. Right. And I really wanted to do a hardcover with the first issue, and so I did a little more investigating. And there were a few. They're called self-publishers. They you pay them to publish your book, and then you have still have control of everything. Right. But they have some expertise that maybe an author who doesn't have a marketing background, they would have that expertise. But their costs were so exorbitant. I mean, one was $50,000.
Wow!
It was out of this world expensive, and I'm I really wasn't ready to pull out of my 401k and plop down that when I felt like I felt like I had the expertise and I had enough connections with that were in the areas I didn't have expertise. And then I thought, well, as a point of pride, how much of this can I do myself?
Yes.
The layout, I had drawn the icon, but it was in a raw form drawing. I didn't know how to take it to where it could be printed. And so I found a designer for that. That was I kind of got down to the nitty-gritty and said, this is going to look like a amateur hour if I don't get a professional designer.
Yeah.
And so just surrounding myself with people and being open to people who were entering my life at the moments in time where I needed help.
Yeah.
And so I decided to set up my own company, Superpowers 365. And I did that as a holistic because I am planning a follow-up book to Superpowers Activated. And under Superpowers 365, I'm doing several video type of programs, and of course blogging. And the video program that I started a couple of weeks ago is Monday Up.
Let's talk about that, because I saw that this morning for the first time. I thought that was fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. A friend of and again, my friends inspire me to do things. A friend of mine who's a runner said, "When are you going to do stuff that I can listen to while I'm running. And I thought, well, I don't know what to do. And then one Sunday evening, I thought, the hardest thing people have is to start the week. Sometimes the hardest thing for me is to start the week.
Right.
And so I'm going to do a video that starts the week.
Mm-hmm.
And so that one started on a Sunday night. And of course, in my mind, it's only going to take a few minutes. 10 hours later.
As a broadcaster, I can always tell you, because it looks really simple when it's all said and done.
Right.
Well, that 30 seconds might have taken 3 hours to actually work through the process and, get your language down and get the lighting right. And I mean, John setting up everything here in the studio, that took a couple of hours just for this show.
Right.
So when you're talking about something, it looks really simple on YouTube. Oh no, they've worked on it for a while.
Yeah, the first one is in my office, and I really did work on that. Mm-hmm. And the second one is outside. I really wanted something much more free flowing and a little bit more raw, not quite so pinned down professional. With Super Bowl coming up on Sunday, I talked about that a little bit. And being grateful even when you're not the winner.
Which is very, very tough for everybody to do. And then the other thing that you're doing as well is the weekly email that you're doing. How is that? Connections.
That starts next week.
Oh, okay.
The first one will go out next week, and the overtime.
So this starts in February.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So overtime, right now there are several things already packaged to go into the email. But over time, I'll be doing interviews with other professionals in the 3 areas that I feel passionate about: better health, greater wealth, and loving relationships. I think if we take care of those 3 things in our own lives, the ripple effect of that in the people around us is tremendous.
Right.
And it gives us the ability to impact our own personal lives, but the lives of the people around us. And so I'll be interviewing professionals in those different areas.
Now, you do have a background in interviewing professionals. We got to just touch on that just a little bit. This is not like something that you just, I'm just going to write a book. No, you've been writing and publishing for a while now.
Right.
Tell us more about your background and how you got into the field.
Well, a couple of things that I've done interview-wise. The latest was with the Review Journal and Las Vegas Business Press, a internet program called Mentoring Moments. And I'll tell you that inspiration came from the editor of Business Press, Lynn Collier.
Really?
Yes, and she edited my book as well.
Oh, wow.
She
See, once again, that connection of people that you needed to get the project done.
Exactly. And she...
Tell her she's a good editor, too.
Yes, she's an incredible editor. She edits the weekly sections of the Review Journal, the real estate sections. Okay. And then, of course, she's still the editor for the online version of Business Press. When I came back to work, I had been out for a medical leave. I had breast cancer and battled and won against that foe. And not everybody wins those battles. Right. And I feel very grateful and fortunate. And when I came back, she said, I want to do video. She had been looking at videos that I had done before called Hometown Discoveries, and interviewing local professionals. I had a wealth management person, a home mortgage person, and that person was also a certified gardener. And so she talked every week about that. And I had a fitness person. So I had already done videos before working for the Review Journal. And when I came back, we kind of deliberated over what to do, because my pace is not newscaster pace. I said, I can't just feed out the business news every week. We have to figure out something that's unique and special and more social. Right. And she came up with the idea of Mentoring Moments. Right. And it was a 3-minute video. We honed in on, I asked the participants 3 questions. One was, who inspired you? Who gave you advice early in your career that set the trajectory for your career? And what advice do you give other people that look to you for career guidance. And we had said maybe this would be about 13 episodes, you know, like a television program, and then pretty much everybody will be saying the same thing, so we'll need to come up with another idea. Well, I think we got to 18 or 19 episodes, and nobody had said the same thing.
Right.
There was a common theme only because of my common questions, but nobody was saying the exact same thing. Everybody had a different answer. The thing that struck me, Rikki, was the number of people who went all the way back to their parents and grandparents for that inspirational advice. And their inspirational advice was all different, but the fact that they went back that far, they didn't just go to the person in their career path. And one of the questions that I asked off camera was, have you told them? Some of the things that they shared with me was so moving to me right there on camera.
Right.
And but you know, we had a 3-minute time slot I wanted to stay within. And so after the filming was done, I would ask them off camera if they had shared with their parents or their grandparents how they felt. And they said, every single one of them said, well, I guess they'll know now.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Well, the only common theme that I found looking at the episodes was, and I thought that was, and then you're right, everybody just broke off into just entirely different areas. It was fascinating. You have to look back at the archives because this is some really good stuff. And these are local kids. Right. I think the first one I saw was Seastrand, the mayor of North Las Vegas, his son, Scott Seastrand, and from a very prestigious Las Vegas family. And one of the things that happens with natives, and it's a really bad habit that we have, we think that just because we grew up here and we knew of somebody, like, you know, I knew the Bullocks, or I knew this person, or I knew, you know, these families. We didn't know these folks. We were just going to high school or, you know, middle school, just hanging out with them. But they have these tremendous histories, and they're the backbone of old Las Vegas that has built the Las Vegas that we have today. So looking at these men and women who are, you know, they're not old. They're like only in their 40s or maybe 50s, and they're talking about stuff. I'm just going like, whoa, this is amazing. I thought I knew this, had no idea. So I think that's the beauty of what you do. And I think, and it's also connected to superpowers, because you're right. The only common thread that I found was them saying that the common thread that they got from anybody was move past your comfort zone. And in this book, you clearly moved past your comfort zone. So that must have been a very reaffirming answer for you to know that, yeah, this was hard.
It was hard, and it was a challenge. And I was pushed to do things by friends that I wouldn't have thought people were interested in, but the affirmations came on Friday at the book launch.
Yes,
that really, you know, that really was amazing. But I have to say one more thing about mentoring moments.
Yes.
I just want to say where people can find mentoring moments.
Yes.
They can find it on businesspress.vegas.
Okay.
And I'll share with you one of my most memorable and fun interviews was with Jim Marsh.
Really?
Yes,
okay, now I can believe that, because I interviewed him once years ago, but it was during the, it wasn't a good time. It was during the economic shutdown, and everybody was like, you know, in a really bad mood. But his family, and I realized, oh my gosh, first of all, I feel like I've grown up with this kid. His daughter. I mean, she's like, I remember she was like a little bitty girl, and now Daddy, you know, it's like, you know, just to laugh about that. But tell me, what inspired you most about Jim Marsh? So Jim, when we went in for the interview, I had never been to his dealership up in Centennial Hills, right?
And so there are antiques everywhere. So I was very fascinated by that. But the interview with him got delayed because he got a call from a client, and I tried not to eavesdrop and overhear, but he truly was counseling this client on who was reaching out to him for advice on whether to repair his car or whether to buy a new one. And he was giving this person some really balanced advice. He wasn't trying to move him in any one direction or the other. And he asked him a few questions about, you know, the use of the car, you know, the longevity of what they were looking for, how long they were going to keep it. And I was just taken aback that a man in his position took the time to be caring and thoughtful with this person who was a customer and sounded like probably a friend. And that he didn't shove it off. There were 10 salespeople and customer service people in the dealership. He didn't shuffle it off to them. They called and asked for him, and he took their call.
Wow.
And that was so impressive to me.
And
then, of course, in the interview, you'll just have to listen to the interview on the website. And Business Press isn't paying me to say this. I just I left the Review Journal on very good terms. I have everything but respect. I have the utmost respect for the work that they do and the challenges of the industry. And so I encourage your listeners to go to businesspress.vegas and look at those interviews.
Because it's neat even for me, because I'm spoiled. You know, it's like I was just telling somebody recently, I didn't even know when I was this little kid going to Rancho that you just couldn't call and get the governor on the phone. Well, because there was like this consortium of guys who said, that little kid from Rancho, we need to help her out. So I would just call. Can I come interview you today? And they would let me. And so then I look back at these interviews now, and these were icons of Las Vegas, but I didn't know any better. And so the same experience you had with folks who did good business, who cared about people in this town. This wasn't I'm not knocking it, I'm just saying it's changed, where you would run into somebody at Kmart. It wasn't like you weren't going to run into somebody at the grocery store. They cared about it because they're going to run into you again, or your kids are going to go to school with their kids. And I would always tell new people coming into the stations I've worked for is, this is one of those towns where don't be mean to the busboy. Because the busboy might be so-and-so's nephew who's being forced to work to pay for high school. I said, you shouldn't be mean to anybody anyway, but in this town, then he's going to go home and say, that Rikki, she was just so mean to me. And so now I'm like locked out of a whole family for something like that. But that's the nature of Las Vegas. That still hasn't changed. That I can tell that you're still experiencing, and you have experience too with Superpowers Activated putting together the book.
Well, I feel like I've been very blessed here. I didn't want to move to Las Vegas.
Really?
When we moved here in 2000, Kansas City, my husband always wanted an address in Las Vegas since he graduated from college. And so it ended up, he was a pharmacist, and it ended up he got a job offer out here. And we came for his job offer. And of course, I'm Miss Positive. I'm like, I don't like Las Vegas, but I'll convince him to move on to California. And it'll be a step closer, because I always kind of wanted an address in California. And we got here, and I fell in love with Las Vegas. And I'll visit California. And I do.
It's really easy.
But I fell in love.
What made you fall in love with Las Vegas?
Well, I think it's probably because I got connected through the media. I had been in publishing my whole career, custom publishing, but connected to the media here through the Greenspun Media Group. And happened to be a part of the team that was the business paper that they had started. And I got connected to the business community right away. And it's a small community. It's a small, tight-knit, I just felt welcomed, and I felt it took a little while. You had to keep showing up. At the chamber events, and I'd run into someone near the end of the week who I'd seen at 4 or 5 events, and we're like, okay, if we see each other over coffee tomorrow morning on Saturday, there's a problem.
Right.
But I think you could still go to a business event on a Saturday morning here. There are just so many opportunities to connect with people,
and it's important to do. I always refer to a time when I call it running away from home, because I went to Rancho, UNLV. I didn't go away to college like a lot of my friends did. And so at a certain point, I just looked at my mother and I said, I'm tired of people saying Las Vegas is so different. How is it so different? This is all I know. And she said, here's what you do, baby. You pack up your car just like in the movies, and then you pick a city and you go. And then you experience what it is. You can always come back home. Well, my first city was Seattle, and it was really different. I thought, oh my gosh. Then I went to Dallas, and it was still really different. And I was gone for 3 years, and I remember that last 6 months going, okay, you're right. It is different. I'm going home. I like my different. And I had to actually to accept that. It's true. It's not easy if you're a newcomer in this town. People are so used to it being a transient city. They got to see you a couple of times, like you said, at the business events. Are you going to stay? Are you going to buy a house? Are you going to become a fixture in the community? And then I'm not sure what that threshold is, but then it's sort of like, oh, well, we love Debbie. And then it's like, oh, now his light bulb goes off. It's like, okay, she can come anytime.
Right, right. And it's funny that you say that. It does take time, but it takes investment on our part too. Sure. To whether it's this city or any other city, to invest the time to develop trust relationships. Right. And I think that's critical. And there was I'm on social media, and I had read this post of this man lamenting that, he would offer to help people and they wouldn't respond to him on LinkedIn. And then there were enough responses to his rant that told me there are a lot of people who feel that way. And I thought, I didn't respond to his rant because it felt like he just needed to rant. Right. But I wrote my own piece on that and kind of relay that his frustration, because I still, friend is a loose term on social media.
A non-term on social media.
And so I suggested that before you ask someone to open up their information about their finances, that you build trust first.
I think that's a really good idea. So we're going to wrap up here, but I wanted to ask you, what are the top 3 things that you would advise a starting author to do? What are the 3 most important tips that you could give a starting author?
So I belong to the Nonfiction Authors Association, and every author has a different experience going on, and so it's hard to just give a blanket sure. off the cuff. But the first piece of advice would be to own your material, own it. It's got to be you. It's got to be yours. It's got to be who you are. It can't be just a rehash of somebody else's stuff. Sure. And the second thing is to this is just going to sound so cliche to say be positive. Sure. And patient with yourself. And the third thing is to reach out to people that you trust and share your ideas with them.
So how can people reach out to you and find you?
They can find me on superpowers365.com. Dun, dun, dun. That's my website. Mm-hmm. There's a contact form there. They can send me an email at contact@superpowers365.com.
Right. And then they can also check you out on social now that you've got connections going, and Monday.
Yes, Monday up.
I love it. Thank you so much for being on the show. I'm just really, really thrilled to meet you, and I was very, very inspired by the premise of your book. And then as I was going, man, this is so simple. This would probably make me journal even more because of the way you've got it structured. I don't have to feel like I'm doing all the heavy lifting. You've got it so I can find my way through.
Nice.
So, and thank you for being on the show. We thank you for joining us here on Live Las Vegas with Rikki Cheese. You're going to be seeing a lot of this woman because she's just getting started. So you heard it here first. We've got our new studios right here on East Sahara, 1785. Is that right, John? Yes, 1785 East Sahara, just past Maryland Parkway. Don't do like I did today and keep driving until you get down to Atlantic. That's too far. Just turn around and come back. We're in a big, beautiful brick building on the second floor, Suite 200, and we're having our grand opening party February 18th. So watch for us on social media. We'd love to have you come out. And would you maybe pop in?
I'd love to.
See, you might get to meet the author herself of Superpowers Activated. We'll see you next week right here on Live Las Vegas with Rikki Cheese.